Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining today's session. My name is Varun. I head hospital success at Medlearn. I welcome you all in today's webinar on aligning training landscape to accreditation standards in hospital on the occasion of World Accreditation Day. So before we introduce our esteemed speaker for today's session, we would like to give you a quick brief about Medlearn and what we are and what we do. I request Subhashi to kindly play the video for us.
Hospitals work round the clock to serve patients. At the center of the action, hospital must confront every situation and every challenge. They must also keep up with evolving health needs and knowledge through ongoing comprehensive training programs. What they need is a promising solution to ensure a continuous learning journey.
In today's world, technology is transforming life. Be it taxis, food delivery, everything we need is at our fingertips. Education is also going through a transformation, and we are at the forefront in the healthcare industry.
Medlearn is a comprehensive learning, training and skill development platform incubated at Impulsys in India for healthcare professionals to attain the right mix of content, learning and skills that help them throughout their career. The platform offers a wide variety of courses that enable hospitals to meet their employee training and development needs in areas of quality compliance, soft skills and induction. The platform is designed in a way that it enables easy tracking of the real-time status of their learning progress. What's unique about this platform is that it's accessible anytime, anywhere, ensuring quality learning literally at your fingertips. Hospitals can now assign courses and track the competencies of users on specific topics with Medlearn's intelligent assessment tool, which gives them better administrative control. Its superior courseware helps hospitals provide standardized care and bridge skill gaps at every level in the organization. The healthcare professionals will also become more efficient and empowered when their learning journey progresses with ease and at their convenience. Let us unite to improve healthcare in India by spreading knowledge through technology. Medlearn. Better prepared for better care.
Thanks, Subhashi. Now I request Mr. Deepak Sharma, CEO and co-founder of Medlearn, to kindly introduce our guest speaker today.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome on the occasion of World Accreditation Day. I'm very privileged and honored to have Mr. Gaurav Loria, who is our esteemed speaker for the day. Gaurav is the Group Chief Quality Officer and Head of Operations and a Senior Vice President at the Apollo Hospitals Group. He's a senior healthcare professional with over 17 years of experience in hospitals, ambulatory care clinics, healthcare IT consulting projects, multi-site management, with an excellent understanding of hospital processes. He's championed go-to-market strategy, turnaround projects, cost efficiency, revenue gen, hospital design, and launched various quality and process improvement projects across all the departments of hospitals. He's an administrative surveyor of the Joint Commission International of the US, and he has also authored more than 25 publications and books. Thank you, and a very warm welcome to Gaurav. Gaurav, very pleased to have you on board.
Thank you.
Thanks, Deepak. So, Gaurav, over to you.
Sure. So, good evening, everyone. First of all, thank you, Mr. Deepak. Thank you, Varun, and thank you, Medlearn, for having me here. For this webinar today. Really honored to be here for this session. And I think the topic that has been picked up by Medlearn's team on aligning training standards, as on stands of accreditation standards. I think this is one of the closest to my heart, and this is something which is very critical and very important. A lot of times we don't understand the importance or criticality of this, but you always see the benefit and the difference that it makes if you start monitoring it and you have a clear cut measure to see the outcomes and see how this pans out. So with that, I have few slides that I would like to talk about as the topic has been provided. And post that, probably, happy to answer any questions that anybody has. And I would actually prefer to answer more questions rather than, doing more of presentation. So with that, let's start. Varun, if you can go to the next slide, please. So, I don't think I have to really talk about how much important is communication in today's world, especially in healthcare. It is so much critical. If we look at a lot of our standards, for example, we look at international patient safety goals, we look at communication standards. I think it's overly emphasized how important communication is and how we should look at it to make sure that we don't end up with patient errors. We provide safety to the utmost level to our patients and even to our staff or members who provide care to patients. So, communication is really the key and most important. And, if you actually start analyzing your data, you would realize, as part of your incident reporting system, you would realize that communication errors are, mostly one of the top two or the three issues why incidents are happening in the hospital. And ultimately, obviously, all this drives down back, to communication drives down back to the whole training piece that we need to make sure that, we have implemented in our organizations. Can we go on the next slide, please? Another example of how do we see the role of communication, how important it is at every stage. And in a healthcare, understanding that we are dealing with human lives, it is all the more critical and important that we make sure that we have all aspects set right. Next, please. Now, accreditation, more of an more of a voluntary process, voluntary process. And, if you think you want to upgrade your quality standards, you want to upgrade your overall healthcare delivery standards, you do apply for an accreditation. This definitely serves as a stamp for quality, showing that, as an organization, you have gone through a structured list of standards, and you have achieved compliance to those standards, or you are following those practices on the ground. While, it is important that how do you differentiate yourself as an organization from other organizations. While accreditations could be of many types, whether there is a national, whether these are international, global accreditation systems, but at the end of the day, what is important is what are you actually delivering to the patient, who is your, kind of the fulcrum or the focus of this whole quality care and clinical outcomes and non-clinical care that you're providing to your patients. So overall, improving the efficiency and effectiveness is somewhere where accreditation plays a major role, where, the whole systems revolve around it, where you understand what is right, what is not right, and how should I handle these issues. If you have built your systems, your organization in a manner wherein you see and understand, what are the right things and what are the things that we should be doing, at what stage, what are the assessments we are doing, at what stage, what are the trainings we need to do. I think all that really matters, makes a lot of difference to look at accreditation as a process and as a tool to improve quality standards and patient outcomes and the overall clinical delivery efficiency system that we have in our organization. Next, please. how does we ensure that there's a return of investment with accreditation? So again, a lot of these things may be intangible, but obviously everything boils down to a certain revenue if we look at that, and slowly it does build. If your accreditation is there, your continuous sustenance through training is strong, your complete mechanisms are strong, it definitely makes a lot of impact, because your errors, your repetitions, focusing on the non-value added activities, all these reduces to a larger extent. Obviously your patient complaints decrease, your experience improves. And when you talk about the society, when you talk about the community at large, and the issues that you may end up with patients who are coming to your hospital, or going to medical legal issues, a lot of these things are resolved with this. If broadly we have to talk about the return on investment, I think number one point is definitely on employee retention, because staff understands what care is about, understands what kind of satisfaction they get once they are working in an organization that follows systems and processes and treat patients in a very ethical manner, and continuously they are getting to learn and grow, not only personally but also professionally, and that their career is not at stake, or it's not like you are just at one place. Their morale improves. Obviously if you are a more structured organization, the whole environment becomes very positive, the whole workforce becomes very committed, because they understand that at the end of the day you would be doing this for a patient. And I'm sure all of us who are in healthcare are passionate about healthcare. I'm sure that, though to run certain organizations, definitely you need funding for those organizations, and you need to, look at the balance sheets, or you need to look at the profit and loss statements. But at the end of the day, what is important is, since you are passionate about healthcare, you are into this, this industry, or this piece. So that is where it matters the most and makes a lot of difference. Practicing efficiency is another area wherein the whole piece on orientation, cross training is very important, and with a low staff turnover, wherein you don't have to do a lot of things, repetitive things, it improves the systems. When you have a knack of understanding that, let's say, there are patient touch points, when a patient has to undergo a discharge process, currently I have got 5 touch points, the patient needs to go to 5 places, he needs to get his summary, he needs to get his medicines, he needs to get an advice, and things like that. If you start working on that process and start training your staff on that process, and looking at how can you reduce these touch points, let's say 5 touch points to 2 touch points or 1 touch point, your workload reduces. For patients, your system becomes more efficient. The non-value add activities that you have in your process, they get removed. So what happens is, at the end of the day, when you go back home, or when you sit back and think, what have I done the day for the day today, you'll feel very relaxed and comfortable that you have done something meaningful. And I think that is one big difference that accreditation makes to any of our systems. Job competency, definitely on improvising on your job specific trainings, on the making sure that people learn more, they enhance their skills, they enhance their competencies, a lot of cross skilling or the multi skilling that could happen. So all these things do make a lot of difference. And obviously at the end of the day, it's patient satisfaction that matters the most, patient experience, patient satisfaction that they get, because if your employees are happy, if your staff is happy, if your healthcare providers are happy, obviously patients are going to be happy. So that is where this whole piece comes in, and that is where also equally the whole piece on training gets connected to this section, to understand that the competencies can be enhanced, work could be improved, efficiencies could be further improved, your outcomes could further enhance and improve, because you are putting in the right training methodologies and the training processes for your staff and for your teams. Next, please. Now, if we basically look at broadly, what is the role of training in achieving and sustaining accreditation? If you ask me, I think more than achieving, it is sustenance, where training plays a big picture. uh, you know when you are going in for a first time for accreditation or a change management program, it's not very easy, but it's not very difficult also to do it the first time. But doing it the second time, doing it the third time, and every time with a higher level of expectations, with more stringent standards, and making sure that you're following everything for the last 2 years, 3 years, 18 months, that matters the most. And that is where training plays a very important role. So based on my experience, I can confidently say that achieving may not be as difficult as sustaining. The first time getting it is still easier, while sustaining it throughout is a real challenge. So definitely training comes in very handy, and as a process and as a function, wherein training helps you to improve the knowledge of your staff, of your teams, and creating that awareness. And this awareness could be about creating awareness among your staff, creating awareness of with your patients through your staff. So basically training your staff in how to improvise the overall quality standards. Compliance with standards is definitely another area which could be looked at, and which is definitely an important piece here. The third important area is overall quality improvement. Now, as part of quality improvement, how do we utilize training, to reduce errors in our system, to improve outcomes in our system? And that is where training plays a very critical role to, let's say you have a medication delivery process from prescription to transcription to dispensing to administration to monitoring. And obviously, you capture as a healthcare organization your medication errors. So, how does training play a role at every step to make sure that your errors are, eliminated or they are reduced? Similarly, other things, if we look at patient falls, similarly, if we look at the infections that happen in a hospital, something as simple as hand washing, how critical is it? And nothing can be more understood by any one of us, because we did go through those 2 years of COVID, and we did realize why hand washing and how hand washing is so critical and important. And this is a regular process. If training is not there, it can't be just implemented on the ground or just assume that okay, do this and someone will do it. So there is a whole methodology that comes into picture. The next piece where role of training comes largely is your risk management and patient safety. Again, how do we understand the risks? How do we identify what measures have to be taken to eliminate these risks? How do we work on these to make sure that we are prepared to mitigate the risk? Our staff understands the criticality of it. What actions have been taken? What have been implemented? And how do we ensure that we have finally eliminated the risk to a higher degree level? And if not 100% elimination is possible, then how can we make sure that these risks are identified well in advance, so that there is somebody who doesn't suffer because of a system not right, a system not efficient, or a system not trained well enough to handle this particular issues or concerns. And last but not the least, I think very important thing is training plays a very critical role in ongoing education and professional development. We have to understand that, what we always think may not be the best thing. There's always another level, and there's always another level. And I think that is the reason why, if I see on the attendees, 173 of you have connected, because you want a ongoing education and a professional development. And that talks everything about the training that we are talking about, right? I mean, it's just probably knowing, I may not be a great speaker, I may not be able to share 200 great things, but my day will be made if you would have learned one thing by the end of this webinar that will help you in your day-to-day work. So I think that is what we look for, right? When we go for conferences, when we attend any sessions within our organization, when we attend any sessions outside the organization, we look at how can we enhance our skills? What new things can we learn? which will broaden our horizon, which will broaden our knowledge, and which we can implement it on the ground for our patients and for our staff. So I think all these opportunities which come in, they really play a very, very critical role. And again, the whole, if you look at the whole circle, the outer piece is basically the training, the center piece is the training, and in middle of these two pieces is everything else that is very critical and important to sustain, to achieve, and then to further sustain the standards. Next, please. And training is something that just doesn't happen once and it's done. It need not happen again. So it must be actually repeated regularly so that people keep up with the current practices and procedures. It provides benefits like productivity, improved morale, retention, and obviously better customer service, which we discussed. But if we look at the broader process, and the same process, you will find it more or less on the next slide also. But then first is it's all about a needs assessment. What do we need to train people on? Where are the gaps? What do we need to do? And this should happen at a larger level in the organization. This should happen at a function level in the organization or a department level. And this should be continuously updated and upgraded based on incidents that are reported, based on, when you do your rounds and you find, okay, these things are not happening. When you have patient feedback and you realize, okay, this is not right and I need to do this. When you realize that there are patient complaints that are coming in and you need to understand, okay, I need to do this or work on this. For example, if you look at a patient's feedback, sometimes patients say that your staff was not empathetic, your staff was not courteous. So does it, and how do you make sure your staff is courteous and empathetic? Obviously, you have to spend some time with them. You have to take them through a training session. You need to make them understand where does this whole training piece fit, and how critical is this for you to measure and make sure that you monitor, and then make sure you have implemented it everything on the ground. So that's where it starts, that doing first a training needs assessment. What is it that is needed, whether it is an organization wide, as I said, whether it is function or department wide, or whether it is kind of on the ground area, individual specific, that okay, this one person may be weak on concepts, may be weak on this side. Can I update this knowledge for this person, and can I do it for the other person? The topics may be different. So it just doesn't sound as easy it is as I'm just talking here, because it's definitely one very critical function and it involves a lot of complexities. But then it's important that we have the process set right on the needs assessment and at different levels. Once we have done the needs assessment, then we identify the knowledge and the skill gaps. This can definitely happen through different surveys that we can conduct. For example, a safety culture survey, for example, a staff survey, for example, a physician satisfaction survey, or whatever we call it. It could be done through, one-on-one interviews or connecting with a larger group in an open forums kind of a thing. It could be just your observations that, when you're going on rounds, you are seeing that, I have not seen most of the staff washing their hands. I have not seen most of the staff checking the identification band of the patient before giving a medication to the patient. So a lot of these skill gaps, knowledge gaps, or implementation gaps could be identified through observations. And the one of the other ways is looking at performance data analysis. You have you measure some outcomes, you monitor the outcomes, and then what data comes out of it, you figure out that okay, this process is not right, this needs improvement, and then you work on those as you have identified this. The next piece of it, once we have done this, it's also equally important to align it with the accreditation standards. And there, what I generally do is you read accreditation standards word by word, and where you find that there are these training standards which are needed. Staff needs to be trained on this, staff needs to be trained on that. So that becomes a additional set of trainings that you should be doing or making sure your staff undergoes that set. And that is where the whole important piece comes into picture. So please have a look at that, and you can develop your own list, you can develop your own standards. But then this is how it generally works. For example, if you look at NABH standards, you look at JCI standards, you look at any Canadian, Australian, QAI, NABL, CAP, any of the thing, in the standards, it would be written that, the standards expect the staff to be trained on this, trained on that. You need to make sure that you have developed a list of that, and then make sure that, you have trained your staff on it. Once you have done that listing, you have done the alignments with the standards, you measure your employees' proficiency and compliance with the requirement. That will actually tell you that what you have educated them, what you have trained them, has it helped? Did he understand? And what more needs to be done there? And finally, it's about identifying the areas for further training. So it's like that PDCA cycle, you have planned, you have done, you have implemented, and then when you check, you identify these are the improvement areas, and then, what are the retraining topics. We see in assessments, I've seen a lot of, just to give an example, I've seen some of the nursing assessments where, you would have trained a person and you realize that this person is still not doing a good job, or this person is not able to effectively implement what is expected out of this person as part of that process. And that's where, you have to make sure that the person undergoes training once again to figure out what more needs to be done here. uh, Next, please. So if we look at broadly, as a process that, as I said, you identify the training needs, you plan for the training. When you're planning for the training, it's very critical and important. What are the techniques you are, identifying for training? What are the facilities that you are identifying? What are the locations and who are the trainers? And I will probably in the next couple of slides, I'll give you some examples of some of these. But then, techniques are very important. Sometimes it is it's through a webinar or a virtual connect that we have. Sometimes it's more of a bedside that, you go at the bedside. Sometimes it's more of a practical approach that you teach them. Sometimes it's more of, you give the presentation or you give a reading material and you say, okay, answer these questions and I know you have understood or not. So it depends. And there is no one single solution for the process. It just depends on, what suits for that topic or for that category of people that you may want to do training. Facilities are obviously, space and, available of audio visuals and availability of internet and stuff like that. Locations would again depend, and, based on the kind of crowd, the kind of audience that you're looking at for training. While trainers is the most important thing. A lot of times people do mistake by thinking that anybody and everybody can be a trainer. Please understand that this is a very, a very specific function. Like everybody can't be a doctor, similarly, everybody can't be a trainer. You have to be a people's person. You have to understand how do you deal, how do you assess. I can't be just sitting here and giving a talk for like 1 hour, and more than half of the people are sleeping. So it's a very specific knack and a skill that everybody doesn't have. So I think it's very important to identify first trainers, who is the right trainer for doing a job. The second piece of this is identifying who is right, appropriately skilled for that topic. Someone who would have, placed 20 fire extinguishers in a hospital it does not mean that that person is skilled and can train your staff on fire safety. Someone who would have observed a surgery doesn't mean can go and train doctors on how to do a surgery, right? So this is very important. How you're identifying your trainers. Do they have the knowledge and the skills to do this job? And obviously, once you have all these things in place, then it's about training implementation, that you're actually doing the training. And one of the other things that generally come up, which has been coming up recently, is a pre and a post training evaluation to understand the effectiveness of the training. that, before training, if you have these 10 questions, you could answer 3 or 4 very well. But after training, you can answer all of them very well, or at least 8 or 9 of them very well. And that is where the effectiveness comes in, to understand if somebody has heard you, they have understood, and you as a trainer have been able to deliver the content as it had to be delivered. So I think that really makes a lot of difference, and it matters a lot on that front. Next, please. So as I said, first is all about needs assessment and identification, matching them with the accreditation standards and your expectations, then making sure that you have, the right people to be training and get them in place, and then you deliver the content. But while you are doing all this, you need to equally set up your whole monitoring piece in place. Because as I said, doing it for the first time is easy. I do a training to people on how to prevent medication errors. Okay. They would implement everything for 1 week, 2 weeks, they would be doing a good job. But if I don't monitor it and I don't sustain it, trust me, after 3 weeks or 4 weeks, it will go back to where you were before week one. So that is where your monitoring becomes very relevant and very critical and important. Unless you don't monitor it, you don't measure it, it's you don't know if it is actually done or what impact it has created. So definitely pre and post training assessments are critical and important. Monitoring how your participants who have undergone that training are applying that knowledge into their workplaces. Has the medication has the medication error reduced? Have your patient falls reduced in your wards by doing the training? Or, are people seeing your hand washing compliance has gone up? Has your infection rates come down? So, we really have to understand and see how people are actually using this training and implementing it on the ground. The other piece here is on the feedback collection and data analysis. So it's important that, the supervisors, who are the supervisors above these people, how are they observing? What is the feedback that they're giving? Peer feedback is another piece that could be utilized as far as training, monitoring outcomes is concerned. And this definitely adds more value, because I as a nurse, for example, I as a housekeeping, for example, I as a doctor, for example, can tell the other person, other colleague of mine, okay, let's do this, this is not how it is. I still remember, initially when we used to do accreditation, we used to do these FAQs on the accreditation standards, and it used to be like a 30-40 page document. And then, we used to print it and give copies to everybody. Okay, please make sure you read it. And then what we used to do is, so for example, let's say if there is a ward and there are 10 nurses there, every day you 10 nurses have to sit for half an hour, go through questions and answers together. I should ask you, you should ask someone else, and just to make sure that all of us are on the same page. This is just one example. May not be the best way of training, but this is just one of the example on how the peer feedback is important. How do you ensure that, if I see somebody not doing the work right, if I see somebody who is not washed his hands or followed steps of hand washing, I go and correct this person and say, hey, just do it like this, not this. That is the kind of culture, and that is the kind of thing that should happen ultimately effectively in every organization. And that is where the whole monitoring on training comes very handy, and makes a lot of difference. And obviously analyzing training outcomes, as I said before, analyzing your KPIs. Has your mortality gone down? Have your medication errors gone down? Has your patient identification issues gone down? How your incidents are being reported? So you have to look at all these things to see whether training has made any impact, or not. Next, please. Sorry, just one sec. So this is just some of the sample topics that, we just thought that, I should just put it up here for you. And this is the kind of topics which are picked up from your accreditation standards. For example, if you look at NABH standards, it talks about hospital scope of services. So, you should first display it, but then your staff should know what is the services that we offer and what are the services we don't offer. JCI standards talks about that the staff should be trained on registration and admission process, and even NABH speaks about it. What are our admission policies? How do we ensure non-availability of beds? How do we identify patients? If there are unidentified patients, what do we do? So at least the teams who are there in, reception, admission, registration, who are there in our emergency, they need to be aware of all these processes, policies, and they should undergo trainings on these, because just keeping a document there is not enough. Someone needs to train, and that is where again training plays a role. Safe transfer of patients, whether it is outside from an ambulance, whether it is within the hospital from one area to another area, another training that needs to be done. And these are clearly defined in the standards. There are about 67 training topics that are there in JCI standards, but this is just some of the examples that are pulled out from NABH JCI QAI standards. Standard operating procedures of various lab tests, how samples are collected. This training needs to be given to the phlebotomist and the lab technicians. Intimation of critical lab results. Again, the lab techs and the doctors and the nurses on what should they do with the critical test results. So they need to be trained on this. Lab safety, radiation safety are some of the other topics which the staff needs to be trained on. Next, please. If you look at the training tools, and I think we have to really look at how do we train, what are the more smarter ways of training, or which are the more better ways where we can make it as a better experience for people so that outcomes are strengthened. These are some of the examples, and if I start with simulation, I think this is really very effective and a reliable piece, and I'll give you an example here. So about 6 or 7 years back, I kind of created a simulation lab at one of our hospitals. It was a huge lab, and this is where we made sure that every person who joins first goes through this lab, spends at least a day in the lab, and then people who have continuous education also go through this process. You will not believe, and the idea came to me was, when I used to go and meet people and ask them questions and stuff, I realized that there were a lot of staff who did not even know how does a smoke detector and a sprinkler looks like on joining. And and it's not their fault, it's just that they've never been exposed to it. So in our organization, if someone joins, isn't that important from a fire safety perspective? Do they understand how to use a fire extinguisher and how does a fire extinguisher looks like? And these are some very, very basic things which people unfortunately don't know. Hazardous material, hard to handle hazmat, you need personal protective equipments. So to handle PPE, how do you don PPE? How do you wear it? People don't know. So for training, if I'm training them on a presentation, if I'm showing them a sprinkler and a smoke detector on a presentation, that may not be really effective to do that. But if I show him in person, this is how your smoke detector looks like. This is how a sprinkler looks like. This is how you wear your goggles. This is how you wear your apron or your coat. That makes a lot of difference because they are feeling it, they are touching it, they are seeing it with their naked eyes. And that is where it makes a lot of difference. And I call this as Apollo PlayStation, but so we can create stuff like this, which will really help people. And this is one of the most effective training tool. The other one is obviously job shadowing, and I'm sure a lot of us do that. How do you make sure that someone is shadowing you? But then this needs to be structured as a training tool. Most of the times I've seen, okay, just follow this person, spend 15 days with your nursing head, just observe, or the supervisor, and do this. It's not a structured process. It needs to be a structured process. As I said, training, as it sounds so easy, it's not so easy. We have to go through a structured process for it to make sure that the outcomes are as effective as what we want to achieve. So, shadowing have clear cut protocols of what are the expectations, what do you do, what do you shadow, where do you make notes, what do you deliver at the end of the day. Those are very important things. Coaching and mentoring is something similar to shadowing, but then this becomes more specific, wherein you focus on specific topics and you do that. People who would have undergone or done MBAs, I'm sure they are aware of some of the business games that are there, either digital or what you do physically in the in management institutes. But then you do go through it, and it's another interesting way of training people. And obviously case studies, wherein you use the cases to understand. And one of the simplest ways of doing a case study is you have incidents happening in your hospital. Pick up one of the incidents or two of the incidents, and just let that staff talk about that incident. If I had a medication error for one of my patient, or a patient fall, and I'm the nurse, you know why can't I be motivated to talk to all the 100 other nurses and tell them that this is how the medication error happened, this is how I prevented it, or I could have prevented it, but now I learned this. What happens in this? This becomes your live case study. This becomes where people understand that, okay, this is how, if it can happen with her or him, it can happen with me, and it happens. So I think, creating these live case studies, creating these case studies, telling others, learning from our mistakes, I think this is again, or our successes rather, not only mistakes. That makes a lot of difference. And hands-on is definitely there. You keep enhancing your skills, you keep improvising, and you do hands-on training there. Next, please. So, this is another example that's a very common thing which is done in many organizations. So we used to do a lot, and we still do it, in our patient safety day, world safety day, or, infection control, medication safety week. You create a room of horrors. You create all the wrong things that can happen, and you have your staff go through this room and identify what are the mistakes in it. It's a very innovative mechanism wherein people understand, they see the wrong things there. For example, if you look at the top picture, there are these IV bottles, and if they are not labeled right, it can result in errors. If you have not marked the patient right, if you have not written a document right, instead of saying 1 mg of a medication, you put 10 mg of a medication, which means 10 times the dose. And there are errors that happen because there are a lot of nurses who would have joined new, or they don't have that much of understanding or the bandwidth at that time, or the mind space. They may result the way we write our medication orders. It's a 0.1, a decimal difference, and it can lead to 10 times, 20 times the medication doses. It happens if we don't mention it right. A chemo drug could be delivered to a non-chemo patient. There are so many errors that happen. So, learning from it, and this is one very innovative way of training the staff on Room of Horrors and making it real fun for people to think critically, be in that situation and understand this is a potential threat, this is a potential error, and how do I identify this and work on this. Next, please. So broadly, if you look at the outcomes of training, definitely it helps to improve compliance with accreditation standards. And I don't think I need to talk more about it. It enhances the quality of care and patient safety standards. Obviously, your outcomes improve. So, it really helps, and it has to be a continuous cycle like the PDCA cycle. You keep identifying, you keep learning. One of the other things that I would also like to talk about, I've been working on this piece on how can we improve medication error reduction in the system. So, with that, we were looking at, if you do a predictive analytics and you see there are particular months where your medication error goes up. If you analyze that, one of the reasons is, a lot of nurses leave in this month, and then you have a fresh batch of nursing coming into your organization. Or let's say, it's June and July, that a lot of our junior doctors go in for exams, or they're busy with exams. So our the scope becomes our coverage becomes less, and so the medication errors happen. This is called prediction, and this is where your training comes in. You know that this month this particular problem is going to happen. How do I prepare well in advance so that staff is trained and this is sorted? So that's another example of what we can look at it. Cultivation of a culture of continuous improvement, definitely training helps you for that. And no matter what you say, it definitely helps you for sustained training, sustained process, accreditation system in your organization. Next, please. And this is just another example of the impact that it can create. And this is a real-time example of one of our hospitals wherein, if you look at the trends of VAP, UTI, and bloodstream infections, how they have reduced over the years. And the impact would only be created if you have a proper training system, an oversight mechanism, monitoring of training, and then retraining and making sure your systems are in place at all levels. This is the impact that training can do on your whole accreditation piece. And this is, as I said, just one example of it. With that, I would like to stop here. Thank you so much, all of you, for your patient listening. And thank you, MedLearn and the team once again for having me. And I'm happy to take any questions if you may have.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. It was indeed insightful. I request everybody who has joined the session today, I would like to open the forum for Q&A. As we have disabled the audio to minimize interruption, I request everybody to either they can raise their hands or they can drop in their queries or questions in the chat box. Before that, Gaurav, if you allow, I have a question. So,
Please.
uh, but I have seen that because of the high attrition rate in hospital, you train a batch of, let's say, nurses or clinicians or non-clinical team. Because of the high attrition, you train a batch on the standards, and then there is a new batch, right? So because of regular shuffle in the staff members, high attrition, you keep on training, and sometimes you're at the square one because at the time of implementing those trainings and learnings to get those accreditation standards aligned, there is a new set of nurses waiting to join. So what is the strategy that we can utilize to sustain those standards even in high attrition rate?
So, Varun, thanks for that question. And I think you have really touched a very critical and an important part here. It's definitely a challenge, and it will continue to always be a challenge. If we say that 20 years down the line with this artificial intelligence, with technology, with this or that, we'll be fine. It's never going to happen because movement of people will always be there, and you really can't stop it. It is a way of life. What matters or what is important is how strong are we building our systems. Our systems need to be strong enough to resist and to absorb that kind of a change that is happening in our system and in our environment. Now, if we just look at, and we can do it, it's not that we can't do it. Just look at as an example, when we had COVID, I'm sure out of 194 people connected here, at least 180 of all of us would have gone through a response to COVID in a healthcare organization, right? And we did not know anything about COVID. But what happened? We learned and we modified ourselves. We modified our strategies, the way we work, the clinical processes, non-clinical processes, and we move forward. And we are still learning. So I think it's all about that. It's about, that whole culture that we need to create in our organization. It's about how strong our protocols, our policies, our systems are. And the training delivery content, the methodology of that, and how are we mixing the experience, the older people in our organization with the newer people, and making sure there is a partnership there that really helps. And as I just gave an example of preventing medication errors, if you look at that data, you will be able to predict that these months my medication, so I know that in June my medication errors are going to go high. Why? Because people are going to leave in May. And what do? I plan well in advance. right? There are some months or some times or some things which I don't know, but most of it is what we know. If there is an exodus of people, there's a batch of people who are leaving, a batch of people who are joining, we know when are they going to do. So it's all about planning. It's all about ensuring that your systems are robust, your protocols are robust. What will happen on day 1? What will happen on day 10? And I'm not saying because I work in a larger institution, and some people may say it is easier to do in a larger institution. With limited resources, it is difficult to do in a smaller institution. But I would not agree to the fact, because smaller institutions, it may be much way easier than doing it in a larger institution. Because the impact that it creates, whether good or a bad, is both very high in a larger institutions. But the smaller institutions, it's under our control, we can manage. So I think that's what should be done.
Thank you so much, Gaurav. Subhashri, if you can enable Mr. Jagdish, I guess he's raising hand for a question.
Uh, your presentation was good, Mr. Gaurav. I've been in the
Thank
training
you.
field for the last 2 decades. My observations are one, that training is on a low priority list in most of the private sector practitioners. Secondly, hospital employees are not deputed by the managements for training outside the organization. Do you think it's a time for the government to make some regulation under a central law or a state law to make few of the trainings mandatory? Of course, NABH has made a tremendous difference. But like you have the first aid training, which is mandated by the Factories Act, I believe it's high time that the government has to make trainings a bit mandatory, because then the money spent on training, that is also given some income tax exemption or so, because most of the times managements don't want to spend much money on the training part. And I believe in the accreditation times, in the years to come, training is going to be the key component. What
Yeah.
is your opinion on that?
Yeah. So a lot of it, I agree on what you said. There are very few, or there are institutions, who have a separate training budget, right? And then there are institutions who don't have any training budget. Again, this could be a problem as a larger institution and a smaller institution, but I think it's very relevant and important. And one is that, when the legal thing will come in, or, how we make it mandatory kind of a thing with tax exemptions or stuff like that, that will happen. But I think we should create more awareness about it, on where and how training is important. So that is one. Second is to also give the credit for the work that has been happening. I think we have come a long way. I've been 16, 17 years into healthcare, and I think we have come a long way from what we saw, pre-accreditation era to post-accreditation era, or what is going on now. At least now people understand. Let's say if NABH says these 20 trainings have to happen, people make sure that they have done some trainings. The degree of those trainings, the impact of those trainings may be varying in different types of organizations, but at least people know that this needs to be done. And the third is, with the kind of awareness that patients have today. I think most of the institutions and organizations have now realized that their staff needs to be trained. Now patients are asking questions, and we are motivating patients to ask questions. Ask your doctor or nurse, why have they not washed their hands before touching you? Ask your nurse, what is this medication that you are giving me? Ask your doctor, have you marked the site, and how will you make sure that you're going to operate on my left knee only and not on the right knee? you know this is where, from a patient's perspective, from a community perspective, we can push. But I think, you are correct, but then, we are moving in that direction. It's just that I think we need to create more awareness, and we need to have people understand the benefits of training. But that can also happen if we talk with specific examples and improvements that we can make and we can impact. Thank you.
Thanks, Gaurav. So we'll spend a few more minutes on the Q&A. I request everybody to drop in their queries or raise hands. Can we enable Kavita Shankar? Uh, Ms. Kavita, you can unmute yourself and go ahead with your question. Um, Miss Sunita. Miss Sunita, please go ahead with your query. Yeah.
Hello, sir. Am I audible, sir?
Yes, please go ahead.
Yeah.
Sir, actually, I'm from medical college. That is a big university. It's a very big task for us to conduct the periodic training and development. And the most difficult challenge is to sensitize the management why we need to go for the training and development. So, is there any standards if specify particularly like this is the mandatory training and development should be happen in a particular organization or whichever standard we are maintaining. So it is a more helpful to us because of the sensitization of management. It is a very difficult task.
So thank you for your question. I think an important question and important perspective from a medical college or a larger institution. I think one or two points is what we need to understand here. One is that currently the standards don't say that any of the accreditation standards that people have to be trained kind of a thing, or there should be a training department kind of a thing. But standards definitely say that, let's say, your resuscitation trainings should happen once in at least 2 years. Standards definitely say that your staff needs to be trained on facility management programs at least once in a year. Standards definitely say that your staff needs to be trained on ethical issues and how to handle ethical conflicts, or what to do, how to report ethical issues or safety culture issues. So for particular some specific trainings, there is definitely a frequency which is mentioned clearly. For others, as I said, if you read the standards, you will find that the staff needs to be trained on this, the staff needs to be trained on that. So if you make a list of those 60, 70 trainings, yes, they are there. But I think it's important, and you've raised a good point. What I would suggest is if you could write back to NABH and request them, if they, because now NABH is actually working on the next standards manual, and they have been really taking inputs from all the organizations, from people. So it would be nice if you can just drop in an email to NABH and say that this are the challenges that we face. If there is a specific standard on it, that will be very helpful. I don't know whether they will consider it or the committee considers it for now or not. But I think at the back end, we should start looking at identifying these list of things and saying that, okay, this is what we need to do. One of the other things that I have done in Apollo is I've built a I've built a annual calendar. So we say that May of every month is an infection control focus month. When we say infection control focus month, it means that you have to undergo these 5 trainings during the month. We say, let's say, September is a medication safety month. So you focus on medication safety standards and the trainings during that month. Not that just that month, you have to do otherwise also, but focusing is what I'm saying. So I think we have to start creating those systems and strategies that would probably help. We may not be able to achieve everything that we want to, but then at least we move in that direction.
So Gaurav, one more question we have received in the chat box is the training of the leadership team. What is your take on, like they have mentioned once in every 3 months, the leadership team or the senior management also needs to be trained on the accreditation specific trainings. What is your take on that?
No, I think it's important. The frequency is something which, the teams could look at, or the organization could look at. I wouldn't say 1 month, 3 months, or 6 months, but a continuous training is needed, and everybody needs that upgradation to understand. Otherwise, we will be stuck in one world, and while we are still thinking of paper and writing a prescription and doing that, while the world has moved to artificial intelligence and, chat GPT and whatnot. So I think for moving forward in life and moving forward with the tools and techniques that we have, we need to upgrade ourselves continuously. And as healthcare professionals, definitely it means even more. So we should do that. As a management team, I think it's important. And one of the strategies which I have got implemented from 1.5 years is something called as a flash meeting, wherein I ask all my quality guys to make sure that in that last week, what happened? What are the things that are not working well in your organizations? Which teams are not following the standards, what they're supposed to do? Present every week for 15 minutes to the unit head or the CEO of that hospital. 15 minutes, not more than that. What happens is this is not a training session, but this gives an insight to your unit head on what is happening on the ground. And then what will happen is if he doesn't understand that, some of the things he may ask questions on it. What are you exactly doing? You are indirectly training him on what needs to be implemented on the ground. So, this could be just one example of how can you push management to do this. But yes, they need to go through some of the program and some of the understanding on what's happening and what is an ideal way of, doing things.
So Gaurav, another question on in autonomous hospitals like AIMS, how can we ensure quality monitoring without a dedicated quality professional?
So here, what you need to look at is I really don't know what's the structure of AIMS, so I wouldn't be able to comment on that. But broadly speaking, every organization is different. Some may have enough resources, some may not have the resources. But if we create a mechanism wherein ideally it's the department head, who agrees on a set of parameters and says, okay, I'm ready to measure this, and then there is an agreed format on what he does, and then they do it, and then they follow it, and then they improve, look at the data and stuff. That should be the way forward. Because quality, if you ask me, should just have an oversight. It's the broader umbrella. But at the end of the day, it's everybody else who needs to take responsibility. While in a larger institutions, you definitely would need at least one resource or one person who brings everybody together. But it could be a quality person, it could be medical, it could be someone else, because it just depends on the organizations, how they structure themselves. But then we have to find out a way among these. But then ultimately, the responsibility goes down to the departments and the team members.
Okay, so Gaurav, I can see few more raised hands and questions. I want to understand how much time you can spare on the Q&A. So accordingly, I can.
Uh, 5 minutes, I'm good.
Sure. Can we enable Miss Megha? Megha, can you please proceed with your question?
Uh, Good evening, sir. My question is that how effective are e-learning platforms for training in hospitals for NABH protocols?
So, Mega, good question. I'm sure all of us have realized, especially during COVID and post-COVID, how important or helpful the e-learning platforms have been for each one of us. Before we did not, want to do this, but now it's become a part of our daily life, and that's where again all of us are connected today on this webinar. So I think it's been very helpful. It's been very convenient, it's been very cost effective for both the providers as well as people who are taking up those trainings. And you could do more, instead of going to one place and going through these 5 modules, you could do more in a 1 day or 2 days, sitting at your place at your convenience. One of the things that I got done is, we created an application and quality app, and we kind of post all the trainings there, and we say that, okay, you undergo this presentation or listen to this video at your convenience. Maybe you travel home for 1 hour. It takes 1 hour for you to reach home. You're sitting in a bus or any other mode of transport. You could just listen to that and finish up the training there. You really don't have to sit 1 hour extra in a classroom session. So it depends again. There are some topics which I can't learn virtually, while there are some which I can do. So if we have a differentiation of that, I think e-learning platforms are really very beneficial.
So I believe that's it, everyone on the Q&A part. Thank you so much, Gaurav, on behalf of entire Medland team. We really appreciate you sparing time as a speaker on this very significant topic. And I would also like to personally thank everybody who was part of today's webinar, and we would keep coming on these expert industry sessions on various topic on clinical, non-clinical, and accreditation specific, quality compliance specific topics. Once again, thank you so much, everybody. For more queries, if you have any suggestion, queries, or if you want to share anything, you can drop your comments on info@medland.com. We stay tuned for the upcoming sessions, and I wish you all a great day ahead. Thank you so much. Thanks, Gaurav, once again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Good day. Bye bye.
Thank you.